Hello and welcome back to another coding session with Mr. Jacob. This is part 3 of our Neovim from Scratch series, where we are configuring Neovim from 0 to 100% full-blown development IDE experience. In the last 2 sessions, we actually took care of installing a plugin manager, in this case Lazy Nvim. We took care of installing a nice neat little theme which makes everything look nice. We took care of a proper status bar here, which shows all kinds of interesting information for us. Installed a small little file manager here, which we can use to navigate around and create new files in our project easily. We configured some basic options, like for example the gutter on the left here, which shows relative line numbers now. Furthermore, we ensured that in projects which do not have a specific project-wide configuration, the indentation styles are correctly set between spaces and tabs, the indentation width is correctly set, and all of that by using Vim Sleuth. If we have a project-wide configuration, on the other hand, we made sure that it is adhered to by using editor config. Using show keys, we have down right here in the bottom right corner always the keys that I'm pressing when using actually Vim for You, so that you can see what I'm doing there in this editor. Furthermore, we took care of installing and setting up TreeSitter properly, as well as its text objects companion plugin, to have a better understanding about the syntax tree that is currently within Vim, to enhance highlighting, as well as allow things like, for example, incremental selection based on the syntax structure of code files or even this markdown document. The last thing that we installed was WitchKey to actually show us a proper key map there for all of our key bindings that we already have and the ones that are still to come. Today will be the day where we will take care of fzf-lua. And you might ask yourself, what the hell is fzf-lua? So in order to understand that, we actually need to understand what fzf is. fzf actually is a command line utility, which I could just call up here if I have it installed. In my case, I installed it via Homebrew, so you can simply install that on a Mac using Homebrew. On a Linux, you can use it actually, or can install it via your usual package manager. If you're on a Windows system, I don't really know if there are compiled versions for the Windows itself. If you are in a WSL environment, please use the corresponding package manager there as well, which would be the Ubuntu one, I think. Okay, so now after we have installed this, we can actually just call that on the command line. I can open it up, and what it shows me actually is, by default, the whole file structure and directory structure of the directory underneath my current working directory. So this is actually the current Neovim configuration that we have been working on for those 2 sessions that we already did there. And now I can not only navigate here using my cursor keys and select one of the files, I can actually search in that as well. So if I, for example, search for options here, it will filter the list and just show me this options file here. But I cannot only type it correctly, I can fuzzy find it. So if I have something like, for example, I start with a con from config, and then I want something with zy and then lua maybe, it will find the lazy lua file under the config directory. And you can see down here which kind of the string actually matched. So it's a very fast fuzzy finding system for kind of selecting from arbitrary data. File listing is only one of its features. So what happens if I now press enter on this file? It will simply be printed out to stdout here. So how might this be useful? Yeah, in the terminal, I could maybe use it in a way like this, for example. I could call up Vim and tell Vim that I want to give it an argument. And I want to give it an argument, which is the return value of the execution of the subshell with fzf. So if I do this now, it will simply list all of our configuration files there. And if I now do the options thing here and press enter, it will call Vim with this returned file and therefore open it. And this is all nice and neat and good, but we want a way to do this from within Vim and not within our command line. So with fzf actually installed on your system, you can use the fzf-lua plugin. The fzf-lua plugin is a wrapper around that fzf utility, as well as a couple other utilities like ripgrep, for example, which are neat and fast replacement for grep in this case. Nevertheless, we will talk about that later. For now, fzf can be thought of as a wrapper for using fzf within Neovim. And if you now think, okay, this kind of sounds familiar to me. I have already heard about something like that, but it was called Telescope. I just have to tell you at this moment that Telescope is another Neovim plugin which kind of does the same thing than we can do with fzf-lua. But yeah, it's just an alternative. I used Telescope actually before. I liked it very much. I then switched to fzf-lua because I like it even more. So let's take a further look at fzf-lua and what we can do with it, because we can do a lot more things with it than just search files. But first, let's install it. For installation, we just go to the website and click on installation. And we already see there, perfect, there is a section there showing us how to install it with lazy Nvim. So let's copy that. And let's go over into our plugins directory here. So we go into our plugins directory as always. We create there a new file called fzf-lua.lua in this case. We save that so that the file is created. We then go into that file and we simply return what we just copied here from the internet. And in this specific situation, we read what it is printed there because it tells us if we want icon support. We can either have support by using Nvim WebDev icons, or we could use mini icons. And in other plugins that we installed before, we actually decided to use mini icons. So we do the same thing here again. So let's comment this one in and comment this one out. Okay, so for now, let's just save that. And let's restart Neovim. And if we are now restarting Neovim, we see that our plugin manager, lazy Nvim, spins into action here and installed fzf-lua. Nicely done. So what can we actually do now with it? Let's go back to our website to find out. So there is a usage section, and there is a simple example here which tells us that there is a simple command we could try. For example, in the Lua command mode, we could actually call require fzf and then call the files method on that. So this will be a repeating pattern. We will always require the plugin somewhere and then call some sort of fuzzy finder function on it. In this case, we want to fuzzy find files. So let's simply copy that here, if it lets me do that actually. And we simply put that here down in our command line. So we are now requiring actually fzf-lua and calling the files fuzzy finder. What will happen? It will actually open up a fuzzy finder for files, exactly as it did before in the shell. However, this is now within Neovim, and it's slightly pre-configured differently. We could have done that on the shell as well, but it is configured in a way where it actually shows us neat little icons. You can see that. And furthermore, it shows us a preview of the files, if I'm just going through them, that we are going to select here to fuzzy find. But now let's assume I want to do the same thing as before in the shell. I could now just search here for options, and we see the preview, and if I press enter, I'm actually in that file. I could call the same thing here again and maybe go to our keymaps file, and there we are in our keymaps file. So you can already see how you can use that to really quickly and fast navigate around your project files, which is a really nice thing to have actually. Nevertheless, you don't want to always invoke your command line and put those kind of commands in there. So we need key mappings for that. So let's take a look at how we could do that. Let's go back to our fzf plugin here using the fuzzy finder. And let's think about how we could do that. Key mappings actually can be defined in different ways. We could, for example, define an init function here so that we have a function, a Lua function effectively, which would be called any time that this plugin is loaded, and we could define some key mappings there using the usual Neovim API. We could use our our key maps file here that we had before, where we, for example, defined that oil command here, which I am using to open up this file selector mapped to the minus sign in normal mode. Nevertheless, we will try and do it a little bit different. So let's invoke our file selector here again, and let's go back into our fzf-lua plugin. And here we will now define a keys key, so to speak, a table which is called keys, and this one will actually contain our key mappings in the end. First of all, to make things a little bit more defined here, let's quickly re-indent that whole file. Okay, so now we have a basic structure there. And now let's see what this keys element actually does. So to get that, or to figure that out actually, we are just going back to the documentation of lazy-nvim, because it's a lazy-nvim plugin definition here. So lazy.nvim, let's quickly search for that. Let's open that up and let's see. So there should be somewhere a link up here, yes. And there is a configuration, I think. No, it was on the plugin spec, I think. And there should be something like keys. There it is. Lazy loading on key mapping. We can already see that here. So let's click that. So why would we actually do that? Why would we actually define keys within our plugin manager definition, so in the definition of the plugin to be loaded, and not within the usual files that are sourced and parsed and executed via the Vim API? The reason is that if we define a key mapping within this structure in this kind of way here, like we are specifying the key, we are specifying the command that we want to execute, and maybe give it an optional description here, LazyVim will actually know that this key mapping is associated with this plugin. And what can then happen is that LazyVim, as the name suggests, lazy loads the plugin only if we really press the key mapping. And this essentially may make the VI or Neovim startup faster. So it's always a good thing if you don't have dynamic key mappings, but static ones that we are going to define now, to just define them as part of the plugin structure. Okay, so we are seeing here that this definition can actually contain a couple of things. It can contain the key, I already told you that. That would be this one here. It can contain the command, which either may be a string or a Lua function, which I guess we will use. We will do that as a Lua function. We can then have an optional mode string, which defines actually in which mode this key binding has to exist. For example, in normal mode, in visual mode, in insert mode, and so on and so on. There's a terminal mode, for example, as well, if you're in a terminal within Neovim, which actually is a possibility. And usually you want that in normal mode, because that's usually where you have your custom key bindings. There are a couple of ones which you might define in insert mode, but usually you are good with normal mode. So that's actually the default. So we do not have to define that if we do not want that and want to map normal mode. And then we can actually define buffer local key maps. That is a topic for another day. Okay, nevertheless, we can then add anything else that we could put into the Vim key map set command, which is of course used under the hood to define the key map here by lazy.nvim. Okay, so now that we know the key, the command, and the description, nice thing. So let's start and do that. So we create that here. We have the key. And in my situation here, I want to map the leader key, which I already mentioned before. It's a kind of a special key that we defined at a centralized position as one of our custom kind of key binding keys. And then we can use it anywhere in key bindings, and it will always be this leader key. So that makes it easier to actually redefine that should we later on decide we want some other leader key. Okay, and I want leader, then I want F for find, and then F again for files. I just use the F prefix for find for all of my different find commands. So most of the key bindings that we are going to define here now in this session will start with leader F. But you may choose whatever you desire, whatever you like. I'm just doing this because I have already created muscle memory for printing those keys, for pushing those keys, sorry. So that actually, I'm using F for find there. Okay, so we now have this key defined, so now we need to define what it should actually do. So we can actually define a Lua function here. And what should this Lua function contain? So this Lua function should actually contain what we stole before from the example there to open the files thingy that we actually already put into our command line down there to test it out. We, however, of course, don't need the Lua command here because we are already in a Lua mode because it's a Lua function. But yeah, that's the command. We require the module fzf-lua and then we call files on that. And to be a good little maybe key binding citizen here, let's first of all make this 3 lines and then add a description key here, which can then be used by which key to later on show us what actually this key binding does. So let's call that find files in current working directory. Now we have a nice description, we have a key binding there, and we can close this table here to actually try and use that. So let's save that file, let's quit out of Vim, let's restart Vim and it loaded without an error, which is actually a good thing there. And now let me press my leader FF key and nothing happens. Oh, okay, so I pressed comma FF because in my setup usually the leader key actually is defined to a comma, but I now remembered because most people are nowadays using space as the leader key, I actually defined it as space in the sessions that we did before. So let me quickly try space FF. Okay, and now as you can see, we now have a shortcut which can actually open up the files dialog, which is a great thing. So maybe we could use the files dialog now to change the leader key to comma, because my muscle memory will always tell me to press comma and not space. But you may configure it, of course, to your liking. So actually, where did we actually configure that? I think in options we might have configured that. So, okay, it's not there. So let's quickly try something like, do we have that in key maps? No, we don't have that in key maps. Okay, maybe that is a good thing that we can't find it yet, because I can then show you another neat key binding actually that can help us, or better said, a neat little functionality, another one of fzf-lua, which can actually help us with our problem, and that is grabbing through a whole project directory using ripgrab. So let's go out of Neovim and take a quick look at ripgrab. Ripgrab actually is a command that we can use on the command line to quickly scan a lot of files and match a regular expression against it or against them and show us the files and occurrences of specific entries. So if I would, for example, call rg for ripgrab, which I, by the way, installed via homebrew as well, so I can do it like that. And if you are on a Linux, do it via your file manager there. It tells me, okay, I have already installed that. But if I, for example, do something like ripgrab, so rg, and I do map leader here on my command line, it will show me, okay, that's interesting that we have that actually in the lazy.lua file. Yeah, that kind of makes sense because we need to set that up before loading lazy. Okay, now I remember why it is there. Makes sense. Nevertheless, even though this worked kind of great, we would like to have an integration for that in Neovim as well, to quickly grab all of our project files in the system there in Neovim and maybe quickly jump to a position like that. So let's take a look back into our configuration here of fzf-lua. Because if we scroll down here somewhere, there is the commands table. And this table actually consists of all the different fuzzy finders which are actually available at your fingertips to be used within fzf-lua. And if we take a look at, I think it is search, we will find that there is something like livegrab. Livegrab, the current project. There is another one, which is grep project, which is actually a slightly different version of that. There are entries in the wiki which define or explain in more detail which one is which. One of those is a little bit less performant and therefore more capable of doing real fuzzy searches. The other one is a little bit more performant if there are a lot of files and therefore can't do fuzzy search. And I'm not 100% sure, but I think LiveGrep is the one that is a little bit more performant, sorry, but therefore can't do fuzzy searching. I'm not 100% sure here. I only know that I am usually using LiveGrep, and in most of the cases that I used it, it's actually working well. So let's take a look at this LiveGrep. By the way, there are a lot of other things, like here in buffers and files, for example, and as you can see in the other areas here as well that we will take a look at in the next couple of minutes. But for now, let's take a look at LiveGrep. So we are calling those functions the same way that we called before files. So let's go back into our NVim here. Let's use our fuzzy finder to actually open up its own configuration here. Let's just copy this key mapping here quickly so that we don't have to write it completely again. And let's create an FG for find grep kind of mapping here. And as we have learned, this is now the call of LiveGrep. So let's do a LiveGrep here. And let's maybe change this one here to just say find by grepping current working directory, something like that. So we will grep through the whole project directory. Maybe we should replace current working directory with project directory, which makes a little bit more sense, I think. Directory. It's a little bit late. I'm sorry for not being able to type nicely anymore. Find by grepping in project directory. Okay, so we have now that. Let's quickly end this and restart Neovim. And now I should be able to press leader FG. And I pressed leader FG, and as you can see now, another fuzzy finder was opened up, and it's a grep finder. And as before, I can now do something like map leader here, and it will show me the two occurrences of map leader, which are both in the same file. So I want to go there, and I already see the highlighted preview there. So I want to go there. I just press enter, and I'm in the correct file at the correct position, and I can quickly change that. So that's actually a really nice thing. So I can now just add a comma here instead of a space. I save that. I restart Neovim, and again, now I can call my fuzzy finders with leader FF, which is now comma FF, and my muscle memory now works. Nice. Okay, so we have already configured two different fuzzy finders. That's great. Let's take a look at some other fuzzy finders that are there and what we can actually do with this fzf-lua plugin here, because we can do a lot more. First of all, you can actually not only call those commands as they are, you can actually configure them. And the wiki actually has the configuration parameters for most of the commands if they have a certain configuration. You can furthermore heavily configure fzf-lua to your likings. You can send specific flags and configuration commands to the fzf executable once it's executed in the background. You can configure the theming, the styling, you can configure the behavior of the thing and everything like that. And it's all documented here in this document and in the wiki here on this GitHub pages as well. So I won't go into detail on how you can, for example, change the styling or the way that it is rendered and stuff like that. But what I want to tell you, and we will use that in order to create another fuzzy finder for us, is that those commands, which for example files, have options. In this example, you can see that this files command or this files fuzzy finder actually has an option. You can put a table in there and you can specify a current working directory. By default, it's actually opening up the current working directory of the Neovim process. So the directory you actually kind of started it in, which makes sense. But you might have a specific reason for creating a fuzzy file finder on a specific directory. And that is actually something that I want to show you, because even though you can create your own fuzzy finders, you can actually create your own Lua functions, for example, to provide the data for such a fuzzy finder. You most of the time don't need to, even though you might think that the specific thing that you need isn't there, but you can actually create it by simply setting some configuration value for one of the existing fuzzy finders. And we will do exactly that now with a files fuzzy finder. Because what I want is, I want the fuzzy finder to be able to open up my Neovim configuration from anywhere and from any project. So if, let's assume, let's go out of here and let's assume that I now make a directory here which I call foo. And I go into this directory and I create a file here which I call bar.lua. Okay, nice. Now I am editing this bar.lua file and I'm doing something like writing a quick function here which does nothing more than printing out hello world. So now we have that Lua file, we have that Lua function here, and I now think, okay, that's nice. Let's go back to one of the other files of my project, which of course is this configuration here. Our Neovim configuration is currently our project directory. And I do my usual leader key thingy here, which is ff. I am actually in the working directory from where I started Neovim. And that can be a slight problem, because I, for my part, would have assumed to be in the project root directory there, or to do fuzzy finding starting at the project root. And we will take care of that a couple minutes further down this session here. But for now, you need to understand that you are always in the current working directory where you started Neovim. That might not even be a problem for you, then it's perfectly fine. For me it is, because I simply use it a different way. I am often in subdirectories of a project and want then to navigate back to files from the root directory of my project. But as I've said, we will take care of that in a second. Nevertheless, I did this to show you we could be in a completely different project, but we want to edit our Neovim config, our currently active Neovim config. I have that actually quite often, that I am in a project and want to quickly add another tree-sitter parser, for example, or I want to change slide configuration in an LSP or something like that. Then I need to quickly go into my Neovim configuration, and I want to do this regardless of where I currently am. So what I can actually do here is I use my fuzzy finder now. No, I don't use my fuzzy finder because I'm in the wrong directory there. So let's see. Let me quickly go out of this directory using our oil Neovim navigation here. And let me go into this plugins folder here where we should have fzf-lua. Okay, so let's define a new key binding here quickly. By simply telling the system that I want to actually define the FC key binding to do something like maybe find in Neovim configuration or something like that. And now we are using the same thing that we did before, the files selector. However, we are specifying a current working directory there. And this current working directory I could of course hardcode, but I don't want to hardcode that. So I'm just using another Vim function here, which would be Vim function, and now I have to think, I think it is std path. Let's cross fingers that I remember correctly. And then I can tell this one that it should actually give me the standard path of the Neovim configuration. So it will give me the path on the current system where the Neovim configuration is laid out. And that's actually everything. If I did that right, and I now rerun Neovim, I should be able to call, first of all, to just show you that I am still in this predicament where we are not in the right folder here, I can do the fuzzy finder with ff, and it shows me our current working directory. But if I press escape and I do FC, we will see that we are in the Neovim configuration actually, and we can quickly open that up there and we can work with that from anywhere in any project, which is awesome. Okay. So now, before I am introducing a couple more key bindings here in our fzf-lua file again, and to show you and go through them with you together, I want to take a look at this problem that I had with just not being able to select things starting from the project root. So I started this Neovim session from within the foo directory, so all of our file searching will happen from within the foo directory. And as I've already said, if you don't have a problem with that, if that's maybe even what you actually want or what you would expect, then everything is perfectly fine. But if you are like me and you would always like to search and actually address your files seen from the project root directory, nevertheless, where in which subdirectory of the project you started your Neovim session, the next thing is perfectly fine for you. And the next thing that we want to take a look at is the project Nvim. I think it's called project or projects Nvim plugin. I can never really remember. So I think it's project Nvim. Let's quickly Google that. And yeah, it seems to be that it is project Nvim. And project Nvim actually is a plugin which not only comes with a nice telescope picker in this situation here. So this is how telescope could look like. And as you can see, it's mostly the same idea in a kind of different display than what fzf-lua actually is. But that's not the interesting part. What the interesting part here is that it actually is capable of detecting the root directory that you are in. And that's manually, that's mostly its primary function. So actually, what it does, it has different detection methods. It can either do this by asking the LSP, which we haven't yet. We will take care of that in the next session of this series. But it can either ask the LSP if it, for example, knows about the project structure and can tell the system where the root directory lies. Some LSPs can actually do this pretty good. Or it uses a simple file pattern search, where it goes up the directory tree and searches for certain file patterns, like, for example, a Git directory or a Mercurial directory, I think this is, or a Subversion directory, or a make file, or a package JSON, or you could, for example, add here a composer JSON if you are, for example, in a PHP, a Symfony, or whatever project, or whatever you actually have in your projects to actually detect their root path. And in most situations, we don't need to configure anything. So we just need to actually install this thing, and let's see what then happens. And I just see that there isn't a configuration for lazy Nvim. So let's maybe just take this packer configuration here and just translate it for our case here. So we are going back into our plugins directory. We are creating there a project.lua file as always. Save that, go into the file, put a return first, copy in what we actually took there from the internet, go here, clean this up a little bit, and actually take care of now how we actually can do that. So this is already right. This is where to fetch the project, but config isn't config in lazy.nvim, but this key actually is called init. So we can actually, we should actually be able to do that. Then we have a Lua function here. We require the project here, and we set it up without any further options. So let's save that. Let's go out of Neovim. Let's restart it. It is installing project Nvim actually. And now we should actually be able to see if this worked. If I now do leader ff, let's see in which directory we are. And we are actually in the root directory where I have my Git repository. So that's how it found it. So we don't need to do anything further if we don't want to add something to the patterns that I showed before, but simply use it from now on. And it will always make sure that regardless of which directory we started in, it will always set the current working directory of Neovim and therefore the root directory of our project to the project's root as best as it can. And 99% of the time, it works out quite well. Okay, so let's maybe quickly add this information to our README here. So we have now installed fzf-lua, and we have installed actually project Neovim. I can never remember, as I've said. So what can we do with fzf-lua as well? There are a lot of those fuzzy finders there that you have already kind of seen the gist of. So there is this list, and all of those entry has a couple of fuzzy finders. And there are a lot of different fuzzy finders, and each of those has a different functionality and can do something different. You can, for example, search your Git log, your Git blame data. You could go through your Git branches, for example, and this will most likely come with an integration then to, I guess, select branches, maybe even create and delete some. I've never used that before, so maybe we can try that out quickly just to see how another kind of fuzzy finder would actually look like. So it was called Git branches, wasn't it? So we are using our simple Lua syntax on our command line here again. So let's quickly require fzf-lua here, and let's call, what was it? Git branches. I hope now I remember correctly what I read just a couple of seconds ago. So let me call that. Okay, so there we are. And as you can see, as I have predicted, we actually have shortcuts there to add a branch and delete a branch. So you usually get some sort of operation support commands within those fuzzy finders. So I would suggest that I now could, for example, first of all, of course, search in this one. For example, if I'm searching for 02, it would only show me series 02, which is the second the branch holding the information from the second part of our series. I guess if I now press enter, it would switch the Git branch. I could add a branch, I could delete a branch, and all of that stuff. So I will press escape here now. Another one which I want to definitely show you is actually under miscellaneous here, and it is actually the command built-in. And the command built-in actually is a really interesting one, because I actually have a key mapping for that in my setup. Because built-in will show you a fuzzy finder of all available fzf-lua fuzzy finders. So all of the different fuzzy finders are in here. So if I, for example, do this here, I can see that there is a Git branches fuzzy finder. And if I now press enter, it will open up this fuzzy finder that we just saw a second ago. So this is actually a neat little thing if there are a couple of fuzzy finders which you seldomly use, but you are sometimes in need of them. So you can bind a key to the built-in fuzzy finder and then quickly access, therefore, the fuzzy finder list there, like, for example, color schemes, which you could open. Then you see all the currently installed Neovim color schemes. And I won't go through this list now, because if I change a theme here, it will automatically be applied, which might create some unwanted flashes of brightness on the screen, so I won't do that. But this is actually a really neat thing. So I want to heavily encourage you to go through this list and just pick out those that you think are actually nice and may fit your workflow well, and then simply create some key bindings for that, or play around with them, or just test them out. For now, for our setup, I want to take my base configuration, which I have taken from my current Vim setup, and I want to transfer it over here. So let's quickly do that. Let's open up the configuration again. Let's go to the end here. Let's put a comma there, and let's quickly have me transfer over those informations. Okay, so let's paste that there. I have now done that, and let's clean that up a little, because the ones that we already talked about here are part of that as well, because I am using them in my configuration as well. So the find files thingy we already have. So why isn't it deleting it? It is deleting it now. Okay, so that can go. The live grab one we already have done as well. The configuration file path thingy there we can delete as well. Then we have a nice one here. Let me quickly maybe save and go back to the file just to load this new configurations here before talking about them, because then I can actually show them working to you. So we were here at FH. That actually allows us to fuzzy find through the Neovim help. So if I press FH, it will quickly show me the whole documentation. And if I now, for example, we had this std path command that we used. I want a further information about that. For example, we passed the string config, but what can we pass as well? We can see here easily by opening up the Vim configuration here, which shows us that we could have put in there cache or config dears or data or log or run, and all of the different options are available. So we can use this key binding to quickly search through the Neovim help, which is very good, by the way. If you are ever trying to define or develop your own plugin, or even a little bit unsure what you can do within the editor, take a look at the Neovim help. It's excellent. Furthermore, we have something like a key map search. So let's assume that I forgot a specific key map. For example, I forgot how to grep through documents. I could, for example, do leader FK, and it will show me all of my key mappings. And if I now to put grep in here, it should show me, oh yeah, nice, you have this leader, FG thingy there that actually greps in projects. And if I now press enter, it would actually execute this one so that I can actually then really grep in projects. That's really neat sometimes if you know you define something, but you don't know anymore how the key binding is. We have leader FB, which is actually what I showed you before. It is simply the list of built-in fuzzy finders there. Nice thing. Okay, then we have something different, which is quite nice as well. It is find the current word. So if I have, for example, some word here that I want to actually find, let's assume I want to find the word find, or I want to find something like this one here, actually, like this f find something. I could do something like I could call this one, and it will find all of the occurrences of this specific string. And as you can already see, it's now searching for a little bit more than just find. That's because I did not press F lowercase w, but I pressed capital case W. Essentially, what this does is it behaves exactly the same way as if you are jumping around using the F key, the W key here, or if you are using the capitalized W. So one of them will really stop at word boundaries when searching or skipping things, and the other one will look for any sort of spacing character, like a space, a tab, and stuff like that. So a delimiter, so to speak. And it's exactly the same with this bindings, but it is really neat because what I can do here, I can now call this and then I can fuzzy find on the files. So if I want to know if there is any other occurrence, or I, for example, only want the occurrences in the fzf-lua, I would just put there fzf-lua, and now I have limited my results to this file. So we can fuzzy search on this results set, which is quite neat. It often is a good thing if something doesn't have perfect support for an LSP to find, for example, some occurrences or references to something, or you want to actually identify something by searching words from a comment or something like that. You can actually use this feature quite well. Okay, what do we have here as well? We have the capability to actually look into diagnostics. That is something that will come up in a later session, I'm quite sure. We have the resume command, which is a neat thing as well. So let's assume I am in this file searching dialog, and I searched there for maybe something with config in it. And then I decided, yeah, I open this one up. And now I want to actually go back to the search that I did before, because maybe I searched for something a little bit more complicated. I can actually do leader FR, and I am back in the same fuzzy finder from before, even with the same entry that I already made here, like config, and I can then go to another entry here. So So let's go back here and let's see what the next one is. The next one would be old files, which actually shows you a list of all the different kind of files that you had open recently. So the most recently used file list, and you can simply search through that. And it will contain the files from all of your projects, not only the one that you are currently in. So all the most recently used files are in this list, and you can actually search through that. And here's something that I quite regularly use, leader. So in our case, comma. And it is actually, if you press it, a list of all the currently open buffers. We haven't yet talked about buffers specifically in Neovim. So there can be more than one buffer open in Neovim that you are currently editing in. So you might have kind of opened different files at the same time. And as you have different files open at the same time in different buffers, you need a way to switch between them. There are, of course, other keybinds in Neovim to actually do that. You can even show kind of tab bars which contain the different entries of the open buffers and something like that. And that is actually the way that you can think of open buffers. They are like the tabs which you have in other editing environments like Visual Code, for example, when you have open multiple files. But please don't confuse tabs in Neovim with different open buffers, because Neovim actually has the concept of tabs as well as multiple buffers. So that's a little bit a difference, and it's a little bit of a conundrum. They work a little bit differently, and I usually don't use tabs in Neovim at all. I only use different open buffers, and that actually works quite well for me. But if you are interested in this topic, I can tell you the Neovim help is actually quite good about this topic, so just read about it if you want to. And as I've said, I usually use this fuzzy finder here to switch between my different files. So if I want, for example, now to go to the lazy Lua, which I opened a minute or so ago by simply jumping there in one of my experiments here, I am back in this one again. And of course, I could do some changes here, and then I could I could switch back to, for example, this file, and there would be no harm done. I haven't even saved that file. But I can, of course, just jump back to it by simply doing the same thing again and again back to the other file. And as you already see, there is an interesting behavior where I switch between the two last files that I have open there by simply pressing leader and enter. So it will always automatically select the next one in the list, which is actually not the one that you were in before. So if I do it like that, I could actually now switch between those two. So it will always select the files in the corresponding order, which is quite neat to, in the end, just switch between the files that you have open there. We will, in another session, take a look at another plugin, which you could already Google if you want. It's called Harpoon, which can do this in even more and specified ways and even faster, which I'm using as well. But this is already a good way to actually navigate between open buffers. So yeah, the last one here is actually a live grab, but not through the whole project, but within one file. Because sometimes I have very large project files or very large code files or data files with JSON and stuff like that I need to find something in. And of course I could use the normal search, but sometimes I want to quickly flip through the different results and see where the one is that I'm actually searching for. And this is actually where I can then do this. And this is actually just a grabbing through the current directory with all that is in there. And I could now, for example, do something like find me all files where I have this, where I have a desk followed by an equal sign. And it will tell me, okay, you have this in actually 3 places in the current file. And I can see the preview there. I can quickly go through them. I could even transfer them now, for example, to the quick fix list, which we will talk about, I think, in a different session there, which I can then use to quickly jump through all of the results there and change some things there, maybe just one after another or something like that. That's actually a neat and nice little keybind as well that we have there. And there we have it. There we have fzf-lua. And you might ask, why the heck did I now tell you about fzf-lua? And we installed fzf-lua before installing LSPs. So to install something that can actually give us more code inside, can format our code, can provide code actions, can make the development environment more IDE-like, so to speak. And the reason for that is that we actually need fzf-lua or something like Telescope in the best situation as a dependency for LSPs. Even though not hardly required, we can do a lot more things with with LSPs, sorry, if we have something like fzf-lua installed. And I can quickly prove that to you. If I open up the built-in commands here again and I search for LSP, you can actually see that there are a lot of different selectors here, a lot of different fuzzy finders, 14 to be precise by default, which are all especially working on the language servers. So you can quickly think about that. If you, for example, want to jump to all references of a specific method, for example, those are more likely than not more than one. So you need a list that you can actually select the target points from. And that's where, of course, something like fzf-lua comes into play very nicely, because it can display you the list. You can either select it directly, or you could just quickly fuzzy find through the results set there and then select the reference that you actually wanted to jump to. And the same thing, for example, for code actions, because there might be more than one. So we need something like fzf-lua, some sort of thing that can display a list, but fzf-lua actually has that integrated, and it provides us with the means to actually fuzzy search on it as well. So that's something that I wanted to have you installed and configured and understood before we are in the next session taking care of LSPs. So I'm quite happy that I could do this session with you and that you are following along here, actually, my sessions of configuring Neovim and seem to having fun. So that's what I get from your comments. So thank you to everybody who commented until now. To everybody else, please go ahead, write me a comment if you liked that. Write me a comment if you didn't like something. Or maybe just ask me something if you are interested in a specific topic or have a specific question. I always try to answer that as quickly as possible. And if you are writing comments here, so when you like this video, actually it helps me with the YouTube algorithm to kind of move this video a little bit more to visibility. What of course helps as well is if you give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, please do that. And if you want to be informed when the next video comes out, you know the drill. Hit the subscribe button, please, and hit the bell next to it to just get a notification once the next of my videos is out. Until then, I hope that you can play around a little bit more with fzf. As I have already said, please go through this list, take a look at all of these different possibilities that you have here in fuzzy finders, play along a little bit with them, and see if you might need some of those. Define some key mappings maybe to customize your development experience for your needs. There is no shame in just playing around with some of them and then in a week or two just decide I never used that, so I can delete it again. That's not a problem at all. So please don't be coy, just try it out and have fun with all the different and great possibilities that this plugin gives you. So I hope you had fun joining me during this session, and I hope you will join me in the next one as well. So I see you then. Bye!